The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
Thank you so much for downloading this episode of So What Do You Really Do? The podcast where I, your host, Dead Air Dennis Maller, talks to artists and entertainers about their day job. And the artist and entertainer on the podcast today is comedian and helicopter tech and Marine Mitch Burrow. Now, we are in uncharted water on this episode. We are out of the studio. We are in Plano, Texas. I recorded with my guests this podcast in Plano, Texas during the Plano Comedy Festival at the Plano House of Comedy. Plano came up a lot in that, that introduction. I said Plano a lot. I was accepted to the third Plano Comedy Festival of my career, at least. I mean, this is, I think, their fourth or fifth. I forgot lost. But this was the third time I've been accepted to a Plano Comedy Festival. First time I actually got to show up to it in Plano. The first one, I think, was in 2018. I'm going to go with 18 or 19. I was accepted into the festival. And I got an acceptance letter. I got all the information. They put me in the Facebook group. And then when I went to see what show I was on, I never got an email. Started looking at the ticket dates and looking at all the show lineups, and I was not on a lineup. Awkward. So I emailed them and said, hey, you guys, you accepted me into the festival. Here's the acceptance letter. You asked me about available dates. I gave it to you, and I'm not on any of the shows. Did you make a mistake maybe? And they're like, oh, we probably did. We'll get that fixed. Hold on. And I was like, well, FYI, I'm only available from this date to this date. And they put me on the date I wasn't available. So I was like, I can't. Like, this was my plan, was to fly to Plano, do the festival, and then fly to Baltimore for my friend's wedding, because I was in his wedding, and then come back to Boston. And I end up that year only going to the wedding because I had to bail out of the festival because I couldn't change my arrangements. But so it was what it was. But then the 2020 got accepted again, and then the pandemic hit. So they went virtual, and I did the virtual one right from this studio right here in Boston. I was able to do my Plano Comedy Festival, 2020 Plano Comedy Festival sets. It was a great time. I know people dogged on Zoom shows, but you know what? I had good experiences and bad experiences, just like you have shows in real life that are good or bad. But I had great shows. Unfortunately, didn't get a good tape out of them. For some reason, my tape came back like 720p, all pixelated. It was terrible. And then I think the other show I was on was a roast show, which roast battling people you don't know. It's always weird. But I was so excited to be able to go to Plano this time around because I was take a nice long week vacation. I have money from the job I'm making. I got some good airfare, some good Airbnb, which, by the way, I don't think I'm ever doing Airbnb again. It's just weird. Unless I'm going to get an entire place to myself and it's something like exotic or something like fancy, not just like a room in a house. That's too weird. That was my experience. And it was like, no, I don't want to do this again. I'd rather just go to a hotel, which I will be getting a hotel, a Marriott actually, because I do enjoy the Marriotts. Yes, it's not too dumb, Mr. Fancy Pants, for the Hell Yes Comedy Fest. Speaking of the Hell Yes Comedy Fest, I'll talk about it right now. November 16th, 4 p.m. at the Comedy House New Orleans, Comedy House NOLA. We will be doing a live So What Do You Really Do podcast. I have 3 amazingly funny, hilarious guests with amazing jobs. You can purchase your tickets by going to the House of Comedy NOLA. You can also check the link in the description here. Also, of course, you can always buy tickets, get tickets to all the shows at deadairdennis.com. So if you're in the New Orleans area, if you're in Louisiana, if you want to travel to New Orleans and spend a week checking out the Hell Yes Comedy Fest and come to a live taping of So What Do You Really Do, I would immensely appreciate if you came to the live taping. I want to make sure there's an audience there. You can find all that information at deadairdennis.com. I would appreciate, this is going to be the first live in front of an audience show. Not the first time outside of the building. We've done plenty of outside of the building shows, just like this one that we did with Mitch Burrow at the Plano Comedy Festival. So please, again, check out, if you're going to come to Hell Yes Comedy Fest, please, Thursday, November 16th, 4 p.m. at the House of Comedy NOLA. Come see a live taping of So What Do You Really Do? This podcast that you're listening to. But talking about the podcast, Mitch Burrow. Mitch was great. All right, here's the thing. I don't want to sound like I'm talking bad. I'm not. I'm not talking trash. But clearly, Mitch and I had different objectives for this podcast. Maybe he didn't have an objective going into it, but he definitely had an objective once the podcast started rolling. And it's not a bad thing. I rolled with the punches. What I wanted to talk to him about was his time in being in the Marines and being a helicopter tech and the business of that. Because this is a podcast about day jobs. Well, sometimes you talk to artists, they're like, my day job's boring. I don't have jokes about it. I want to be funny. No. I want to make jokes about other things. And so they don't realize that the interest of this podcast, the audience, the reason you're listening is to hear about the interesting things that some of us comedians and entertainers have to do to support our industry of comedy. I don't want to say he had a chip on his shoulder. I think he definitely needed some venting of frustrations. Look, sometimes, like I said, you do a show, that's great. Sometimes you do shows that aren't. His show was great. It was just, unfortunately, I don't think, and he admitted it. I'm not telling stories out of school. I'm not gossiping. I'm not saying, and it's not his fault. It was just not well attended. My own shows at the Plano Comedy Festival were not well attended, which means I also just did not get another good tape either. But that's the anxiety I have to deal with. But I think Mitch was a little upset about that going into our interview after his show, and I think he wanted to vent some frustrations about that. And, while I tried to get him on track to talking about the jobs, we ended up talking more about how he got into comedy and his opinions of it and where he thinks he's at with his comedy. And that's stuff also that I wanted to talk to him about. We had a limited time, so we got through it pretty quickly, and I really just had to steer him into the conversation that I think he wanted to talk about. And I had to notice that as an interview, I have to notice what it is my guests want to talk about, despite my better intentions. Find the actual story. And that's what I did. And I think it's a great conversation. Mitch has a very interesting story. He's a very funny comedian. And I do wish him all the best of luck. And trust me, you'll hear me talking about inventing some of my own frustrations with the industry of comedy and the industry of podcasting and some of the other things too. So I think it was a well-deserved venting frustration for two comedians to talk about what this business is. And I think Mitch has a great story about how he got started in comedy. He may not want to admit to it. He may not want to use it as fodder for certain television shows that care more about your story than they care about you as a comedian, which I think is not right. But anyway, he could have definitely used some of that story to get him farther, maybe in some of those competitions. We'll talk all about it. So please enjoy my conversation with comedian. Oh, by the way, in Texas, I also visited my favorite hat shop in Austin, Texas, the Hat Box. It no longer has a physical location. It's kind of like a speakeasy hat box shop now. And I got this brand new plaid cap. I have another cap to go with it. This one's made all 100% cotton, which keeps me warm in the winter and it'll keep me cool in the summer. And then I have another one that's half cotton, half linen, which will also be so relieving of the heat in the summertime. So I'm excited to be wearing my new hats from them. But you'll see more about my hats if you keep checking my Instagram, or just come ask me about hats in person. And you can ask me about hats in person. I know I have a lot of opinions about hats. You can ask me all your questions and hear all my opinions about hats if you come to the live taping of So What Do You Really Do at 4 p.m. November 16th, Thursday, November 16th at the Comedy House NOLA as part of the Hell Yes Comedy Festival. Enough with the promotion. Thank you so much for listening, and please enjoy my conversation with comedian, helicopter tech, and Marine, Mitch Burrow. Yeah, I figured with all of this, traveling this time around, I wanted to see if I could get video done, because we just switched over to video with the network that my podcast's on, the Big Comedy Network. Because everything in the pandemic, I went remote. So I had all the video anyway because I was doing everything through an online service with all that. So
what is the Big Comedy Network?
Big Comedy Network is a new network started by a comedian named Scott Henry and his wife Catherine Henry, and they did they just during the pandemic, like they really got into Clubhouse, which is that one of those audio social media networks.
Yeah, I think that it kind of fell out after.
Oh, very quickly. But they built a nice network of people in that, and they're like, you know what, we've met a bunch of good comedians. Let's see if we can create a podcast network. So they created their podcasts, and they giving a space for other people with podcasts, comedians and stuff, to be able to have a space and promotion.
So
and they brought my podcast on with them into the network.
So do they have like an email list that they send out to everybody, like, hey, if you like this one, check out this one? Or
I think so. I let all of them handle all the technical stuff now, since I ran all of this for 2015 till this year. So what is that, 8 years? I did everything for 8 years. So I'm like, all right, I can not have to worry about numbers. I don't have to worry about promotion, all this stuff. You handle all that stuff. Let me just handle all the interviewing and editing, and I just give them a complete package. They put everything up now. They do all the promotion, and I just let them handle all the stuff that would drive me personally crazy because of obsessive compulsive disorder.
Okay.
But since we're talking about the pandemic, since it started with the pandemic, the big comedy network, what as a comedian who tours, what was your pandemic experience like?
It was amazing.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, because
I love to hear positive pandemic stories. Nobody else has them.
a lot happened for me during the pandemic. The end of the pandemic was where things fell apart. But during the pandemic, when you're not a famous comedian, you go on the road, you make $1,500 for a weekend, and you get a few weekends a year. Like, you're not making a lot of money. So it was, I was always struggling. I was working as a door guy at the Comedy Store, so that was how I was like making my living. And then I was on the road maybe once a month. So then when the pandemic hit, we were, set up for unemployment as employees of the Comedy Store, and we got our little measly amount of unemployment, but then we got the additional $600 a week, and so at this point I'm making more money than I had in the last 7 years.
Oh, I was the exact opposite because I was doing freelance, and I didn't claim a lot of the work that I was making, or a lot of the money from the work I was making. So what they set me up as a freelance artist, what I could prove was half what I was making.
Wow. So the unemployment itself wasn't good. It was the bonus.
Yeah.
That we were able to get. That's what did it for us. So I was making a lot of money that way, and then there were places that needed comics. Like, the big headliners weren't doing anything. They didn't want to risk it. So then, like, the Improv in Hollywood, they were doing these big outdoor shows. They would have like a 50-foot inflatable screen, and it would be a drive-in show. So I was performing comedy for like 100 vehicles. Instead of laughs, they just like honked the horn. Yeah. I was like, okay, this is cool, I guess. And then I got cast to host a show for Fox. And it was only 5 episodes, but I got that. And then the Comedy Store was asking me to come in and do some shows and do podcasts. So that was a good thing. And then I met my now wife, and we ended up deciding that we wanted to have a baby together. I was going off-roading and camping on a regular basis. And then I did America's Got Talent, and I thought that my life was about to change because I got 4 yeses.
Oh, okay.
Then COVID ended, and all of the headliners came back, so none of the clubs were booking me. The show that I did 5 episodes for didn't get picked up.
Which show was it that you did?
It was called Crazy Ass Criminals. It was on Fox, and it was like a Tosh.0 style show for
America's
videos. Home
Videos, yeah.
Yeah, like, we're watching criminals do stupid things, and then we're making fun of it. It was on every episode. I'm just like, can we get a few more white criminals? Because it's me, Aries Spears, and then a Mexican dude who's like really popular on radio in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And so I'm the white guy, and it's just minority after minority. And so they're like, Mitch, what kind of jokes do you have for this? And I'm like, not a lot, really. I just feel like he's probably oppressed, and society in itself has been really hard on him. And honestly, we should just see if we can help him out instead of locking him up. And they're like, Mitch, that's not funny at all. And I was like, well, what's going on in his life isn't funny. Then they'd have some white crackhead, and I'd be like, this bitch is just, oh man, she got what she deserved. So yeah, it was a fun show though, but it didn't get picked up. And then America's Got Talent I got 4 yeses from the judges, and then I'm waiting to find out when my episode's going to air. And then at the last minute, like after they've had me give them like... And listen, I would go back on it in a minute because that show can change your life. But, they asked me for pictures of me and my dead granddad. They want pictures of me from when I was
the
in the
sob
Marine Corps. Like, they want all... Because they did a lot of production work on my story. And so because of all that, I'm like, this is happening. They put a lot of time and effort into it. And then the very last judges audition show, which they tell you the Friday before your episode airs when you're going to be on. And so that was like 2 months. And they go, yeah, sorry, we're not putting you on this year. And the only evidence that I was on the show is when they're doing the judges' deliberations. Like, you can see my picture and name behind Simon Cowell's head. So
I have friends who do that, who do the audition shows. They never get on the TV show, but you'll see them walking around the background, and then they'll use America's Got Talent as a credit.
I mean, they were clearly trying to decide if I was going to move on to the live shows, but for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. But that was my profile picture on Instagram for a while.
Simon Cowell with you behind him.
My picture behind Simon Cowell, yeah. So then, after all that stuff happened, like the world opens back up, and I feel like I have a daughter. She's 6 months old at this point. I feel like everything went bad in my life, so I quit doing comedy for a while, and I moved to a really rural area of Texas to work on airplanes.
Oh wow! Well, we'll talk about the airplanes in a second.
And that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, that's a typical story. A lot of people, like, I flourished comedy-wise during the pandemic. Like, I wrote material. I was performing Zoom shows every night of the week. It was good. Zoom shows were good or bad, depending on how, like, just like regular shows. Sometimes
Zoom shows were bad or not that bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, Plano, they did the virtual festival that year, and we had 200 people watching in every show.
That's awesome.
Flappers had a lot of really good shows because both of them and other people did this where they treated it like a real live show.
Yeah.
They had a tech person running it. They had music in between. They monitored the audience to make sure that you had somebody to monitor the audience, so in case they started talking and didn't realize their mic was on, they could mute them. We private message. So there was good shows and bad shows, and there were god awful shows too. But to me, there wasn't that much difference because sometimes you're doing shows in real life, you're doing shows for 200 people or 5 people.
I really wish that, like every show that I'm headlining, I just wish they'd say it's like this club presents, because I'm just not anywhere famous enough. Like, did you watch the show tonight?
I was in and out because I was setting things up, but
I am not trying to sound like... I am a very modest person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very realistic about where I am with talent in all aspects of life. But I am great at stand-up comedy. And nobody knows it.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm headlining a show, and there's 14 people there. And every person that walked out of here, I had a notepad set up. I was like, hey, if you want to know when I'm coming back to town, put your name and email. They all did it. They were all like, hey, we want to come see you again. And it happens at every show that I do. But we live in a society of fame. So every show that is like Mitch Burrow, nobody knows who Mitch Burrow is.
Yeah.
So no one buys tickets to see that show, and it's very frustrating.
And there's that adage where people talk about if you put names on a flyer to promote a show and no one knows the names, they're not going to go. Well, if you just put comedy and no names, they're more likely to go.
Yeah. I mean, I run a show in Wichita Falls, which is 100,000 people. I put out a $250 Facebook ad for the show, and I'll put a clip of the comedians that are going to be on there, but I call it Liquid Laughs. It's the Liquid Laughs comedy show in Wichita Falls. And I sell out just about every single time, because it's not, like, it's, unless you're saying, hey, Joe Rogan's going to be here, or like somebody
A name, yeah.
They're not coming for a comedian. They're coming to see a show.
Yeah.
And so I just put up like 1 minute clips of each person that's going to be on or something like that, just so they can see the show's going to be funny, but they're not coming to see Mitch Burrow from Crazy Ass Criminals.
The show that didn't last.
Yeah.
A show that nobody watched. Yeah, I mean, I feel you on that because, like, while I flourished during the pandemic, as soon as everything opened back up, all the comedians who didn't do anything, who didn't sit around, jumped back on the shows, and they're the ones that got all the bookings.
Yeah.
And here's me, who worked for 2 years every day doing comedy, making people laugh, and doing shows, and working hard, and making connections, and networking, and they're like, oh, you did Zoom shows, you don't count anymore.
I just felt like some of us went out of our way to help the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And then when everything opened back up, they forgot that.
Yeah.
And that's where I was a door guy at the store. They're having problems, like, getting people to come out when they, like, opened up outside areas and stuff like that. And I'm there for them. And then when everything opens up, they're like, we got to get Theo back. We got to do this. And I get it. But also, like, don't forget about the people who were there when nobody else was coming. Like, throw me something.
Yeah.
And,
oh, you're going to bring Theo in? Well, let me open up for Theo so I have an audience of people to actually see me.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. I get it, but you got to get people in so that the place can be busy, and you got to do that by putting on the name. But you don't got to put me on every show.
Yeah.
But just remember that I was there doing comedy through a window to the people who were drinking out on the patio so that they had an incentive to be there instead of the bar down the street that has chicken wings. I was the reason, not Mitch Burrow, but comedy.
Yeah.
I was the reason that they were there. So, don't forget about... Also, I just had a baby. Like, I need something. And I just felt like, there's a little bit of manic, like, disorder there, too. Like, it was just a really unhealthy time mentally for a lot of people. So, I was just falling apart, and I felt like no one was there for me. And that's when I was like, well, to hell with it. I'm going to move to the most rural part of Texas possible.
That's
where I'm at.
And you're going to have to work. Yeah, well, if you're a road comic, you can do the road from anywhere.
Yeah.
You live, So you got that at least. But let's start because I was really interested about your service in the Marines because very few people think that the military is funny. So... when you were young, what made you want to go in the Marines? Was it, well, you're about the same age as me. I'm 42. You're what? About
43.
43. So we're exact same age almost. So we both grew up with, like, the GI Bill. Let Uncle Sam pay for your college. Serve your 4 years and then go to college. Was that something that... No.
I had a GED. I had no interest in going to college. My grandfather retired out of the Army with 20 years. My mother was active duty when I went in. She was active duty Navy.
Okay, so you come from a military family.
Yeah, a lot of people were in the military in my family, but I just, I wanted to work. I hated school, and I just wanted to do something. I didn't like studying and doing homework. Like, I wanted to be, active. And, the military was just... Also, I grew up in the country... shooting guns, riding four-wheelers, camping. Like, the military just seemed like all the stuff that I enjoyed doing, and maybe some guy yelled at you every now and then.
Shooting guns, riding tanks, plastic
Pretty
cannons.
Much, yeah. They were like, oh, you like Jeeps? Have you ever, driven a tank before? And I was like, dude,
let me introduce you to a Humvee.
Yeah. Right. Oh, you shoot a 9mm? Have you ever shot a grenade launcher? And dude, let me tell you, grenade launchers are the funnest. I'm not talking about the rocket launcher, right? That you see people on their shoulder. A grenade launcher. It's like the grenade is I don't know, maybe 8 inches. And it's like you sit behind it on the ground and you aim it and you go right, and then like a few seconds later, you just hear. Hey, look, man, I ain't doing. My wife is calling me.
Yeah, you can take the call if you want. Yeah, it's your wife. It's important.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I have no idea what this is about. Let me see.
Oh, Lord, shut up. I'm just going to see your fucking show, motherfucker.
Oh, hey. First, why are you talking like that? I'm being sweet.
You were acting like I was calling to annoy you. Oh, I don't know why you calling me right now.
Yeah, because I thought there might be something wrong.
Whatever.
Oh, see, I'm glad that this is on video. People can see what I got put up with. I'm like, honestly, like, hey, man, do you mind if I answer the phone? My wife is calling. It could be an emergency.
No, an emergency is I care about you, motherfucker.
Yeah, and I care about you, too, which is why I interrupted this podcast to see what your dumb ass had to say to me.
I didn't know you were doing a podcast. How am I supposed to know?
I thought you're supposed to be asleep by now. That's the whole
I
reason.
just finished the whole fucking schedule. I'm about to go to bed.
All right, well, I love you.
Well, you too. How was your show?
It honestly, like, there was only 16 people in the audience, but it was great.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was like half of the audience was all like mothers, and I just did probably like 15 minutes on Billy and what a monster she is, and they loved it. And then I did the stuff about being in the delivery room with you and female hysteria, which they also all love. So it was great. I love you, babe. All right, I will. I'll talk to you tomorrow. All right, sleep well. Bye-bye. You can leave all that in. Let the world know I gave up my life for someone who got mad that I cared enough to answer the phone. Gave up on my dreams so I could be like, oh, this could be an emergency. Well, fuck you, motherfucker.
Well, your dreams weren't shooting off grenades.
Man, at one point in time, that's honestly like one thing I'll say is like my dream growing up was all I wanted was to be in the military. And yeah, I'm fat now. Well, I was kind of a fat kid, so like I had to work hard to get in shape to go into the military. I had to work hard to stay in the military, and I did that. And I did what I wanted to. Like I've always felt like that was what I always wanted, and I did that. So now everything else after that is kind of a bonus. So like it's.
That's interesting that as a child you didn't have much of a dream or a future. You're like, well, I guess I'm just going to go into the military and that's going to be my life.
Man, hold on, man.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Some people don't have that forethought.
But look, I joined the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Okay, now for a little chubby kid who wasn't like the star athlete or anything, being able to make it into the elite branch of the military, that's a pretty big deal. Also, it's not like I just went to boot camp and then nothing else happened after that. I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. I went to Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, the Philippines, Spain. I went to Iraq. Like, I did a lot of shit before I turned 22 that most people won't ever experience
in their entire
life.
Yeah.
And so I know, like, a lot of people don't... a lot of people look down on the military, but the truth is, it gave me a skill set that makes it where no matter where I'm at in my life, I can always go and make $100,000 a year, which isn't rich, but it's more than enough to take care of me and my family.
Yeah,
no matter
very
where I'm
easy to
at in
live
the
comfortably
country,
off
I can do that. I got scared, so then I went back to that. And also, like, it changed me as a person. Like, I was just some dumb kid, and then when you go through, like, the training and stuff that the military has to offer, it's a big deal. It changes you. So, I know a lot of people think, like, just dummies who can't do anything else, that's what they turn to. But, I mean, I know people who had, like, college degrees that were like, this is what I want to do. And that's what they did.
Oh, dude, I went to college. I went to 6 years at community college and didn't graduate. And finished what should have been 3 degrees, one in radio production, one in television production, and one in broadcast journalism. 20 years later, I'm sitting on a couch with you, hoping that all of this works and syncs up for my podcast. So if you're talking to people who went to a lot of college and
how great is it when you do an hour-long podcast and then when you go to upload the files, none of them worked.
So far, that has not yet to happen. So let's not jinx it today. But
I know some people that have. I just did a podcast with a dude in Miami, and he was like, "Hey man, if you see one of these red lights turn off, please tell me, because I got about 5 minutes recorded of an hour last week." And I was like, "Oh god."
Oh yeah, my head's on the swivel checking all 3 of them.
Then you gotta go back and do it all like it's the first time.
Yeah.
You gotta pretend like you're being genuine again, and that's just not. We're comedians, not actors.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that, like, with me doing this remote setup on this is me having to worry about doing this stuff and making sure I have no backups. In my studio at home, I have a professional built studio at home, and in there I have three backups. And if something goes wrong, I have something else to back it up. That's why I've never lost anything. If one of these cameras die, I'm back to trying to figure out how to do it.
What are these cameras?
These are Zoom Q8s, and that's the the Q4.
Oh, so this is the same company that
makes
the
the audio
H4N
recorders, yeah.
and the H6N. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But they basically put their recording microphones into digital cameras. So, and I use it at home as my webcam, and then I do record to it as a backup. But since that's my business is for the past 25 years has been audio, radio, television, remote broadcasts, doing that. And then also to be told by the podcast industry when I moved out of radio into podcast, to be told by people from NPR, they go, "Oh, you worked in radio? That doesn't qualify you to make a podcast." I'm like, "Are you, what? We invented podcasts. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, NPR. I always, I've never been able to figure out how to turn it into a bit, but I love / hate the interview style of NPR. Right? Like if you listen to like This American
NPR, welcome to This American Life.
Yeah. All right, and all right. So I'm gonna switch the roles a little bit. I'm gonna be the interviewer.
Okay.
And this is not how the interview goes, but this is what you hear on the podcast. All right. So tell me, what do you do for a living?
Well, I go to tour. I work in Boston,
so
and
right
the
now he's telling me about
and then I go
he lived
through
in Boston,
this,
and it was like, "Hey man, shut up and just let me hear that guy say it."
Yeah, they have that documentary style where they're narrating everything, and
they're narrating words that the other person is saying. It's like, you don't have to do that. This isn't Blue Planet, where I'm watching ants build a mound, and you're explaining to me how they're doing it. This guy is saying, like, I work in television, and COVID made things difficult, and then you go, and during COVID, while working in television, things got difficult.
Oh, I've had jobs where I go do recording for podcasts for like an NPR company like that, and they're like, "Hey, when you arrive, just turn on the recorder because we want to hear them answer the door." I'm like, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
We want to hear the candid moments before the interview starts, and it always it's like, so there was like this murder that happened, but let's just hear how they answer the door and invite you into their kitchen. Like, how about they just tell us how they killed this person?
What was the job that you were doing in the Marines?
I worked on helicopters. I was a helicopter mechanic, and the helicopter was the CH-46, which was like a Vietnam-era helicopter that we were still using in the early 2000s.
The ones you see in Full Metal Jacket where he's flying across the rice fields and plucking people off going, "Get some! Get some!"
That's a Huey.
Okay. All right.
The 46 looks like a hot dog, and instead of a main rotor and a tail rotor, it's tandem rotor. So it has two big rotors on top and the front and the back.
Okay.
The Army has one that's bigger called a Chinook, but it looks like that, but it's just a little smaller.
Okay.
So that was my granddad's thing. My granddad was like, hey, join the Marine Corps if you want, but please, like, I was in the Army forever. I know, just get a job that's going to give you a skill.
Do you get to pick that when you're in basic training? You're like, hey, I want to go this route?
You do it before you sign up.
Okay.
So while you're going through the recruiting process, you can either sign up open contract, which means, hey, I didn't do too good on the test, so give me whatever you will. Or you can go like, hey, I did really good on the test. This is the career field that I want. So I did really good, especially on the mechanical portion, so I wanted to work on airplanes. And that's what I got. I got to work on helicopters. My brother, he's 25 years younger than me. He's in boot camp right now. He also did really good. He's doing cyber security forces.
Okay. Oh, that's definitely transferable into the real world now. Yeah.
My sister worked Intel. She's out now. She makes like $180,000 a year doing I don't know what.
She's also not allowed to tell you what. So.
I mean, who knows what it is. Also, like, here's what I realized about guys is unless someone offers us information, we don't really ask. Like, I'll hang out with a friend that I haven't seen in a couple years, and we might talk about, sports or, what car we're driving or whatever, and then I get home and my wife will be like, so how's his wife and kids? And I'll be like, I don't know. He didn't say anything about it. You didn't ask?
Never came up, yeah.
You didn't ask? Well, no, because he didn't, I don't know, maybe he didn't want to talk about it. I'm not going to pry. My grandmother would always, I'd come home and I'd hang out with all my friends from high school, and she'd always ask me, like, so what's BJ doing for work these days? I don't know. We just went out to have a beer. I wasn't interviewing him for a job. So, it's like my sister, she doesn't tell me. I don't dig into it. So, for all I know, she makes $180,000 as a janitor somewhere, which I would love to find out where that's at.
Well, so you had this now skill set working on helicopters.
Yeah.
2 questions. 1, how transferable is that skill set to other aircraft?
100%.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
And then second question is, what was the plan after the military?
I was going to go to college and be a teacher. I had a GED, but while I was deployed to Iraq, I took the ACT, and I scored, pretty good on it.
What's the ACT? I don't know what that is.
So you know what the SAT is?
Yeah.
It's just another college
aptitude
exam.
test? Okay.
Yeah, and so I took the ACT, scored high enough on that to get into college, and I was planning on transferring to the University of Georgia, so I went to a tech school, did like a year of it, and remembered how much I hated going to school. So a friend of mine was like, hey, I'm going to work on the Osprey, which is a really cool aircraft that crashed a lot. And he was like, I'm on this flight test program. It pays this much. Do you want to do it? I was like, yeah, dude, I'm so done with school. So I moved to California and did that. And I was there for 3 years when I decided to try comedy.
Okay. And what was the impetus to start doing comedy?
I loved
Everyone
it.
has that moment where it's like you're the funny guy in the office, or something in your life happens that's tragic, and you're like, I realized that I don't have that much time in life, and I wanted to do it, or inspirational. Or some people are just like, I was at an open mic and they sucked, and I realized I can do this better than them.
No, I listened to Raw Dog on XM satellite radio, like nonstop. And if I wasn't listening to that, I was listening to Opie and Anthony, which was a morning show, and they had Patrice O'Neal, Louis C.K., Bill Burr, like all the great New York comedians were always guests on that show. Jim Norton was the third mic.
Yep.
It was just like if the radio was on, it was some form of comedy, and so I just I picked up the structure, the cadence of it, and so when I would be at parties, hanging out, I would tell these stories about my time in Thailand, or things that we did in the Marine Corps, or just, something that I did growing up. But I would tell these stories with the same cadence and structure as a joke. And people were laughing. And I was like, oh, well, I love comedy. Maybe I can actually do this. So I signed up for an open mic and went and did it. My first time was great.
Where was your first open mic?
At the La Jolla Comedy Store in San Diego.
Okay. Still there?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely still there. And
I come from Boston. There's a lot of stories where it's like, oh, I started at the Chuckle Fuck up on Route 1, which is no longer around, or I did an open mic at a VFW hall in Maine, somewhere in the backwoods of nowhere.
Well, I ended up I ended up moving to Seattle, which is where I really got my start. And I performed at a club called Giggles.
Okay.
And I was there for maybe 2 to 3 years, and then Giggles, the guy who owned it, lost his lease. The lease was up, and the guy didn't want to renew it. So Giggles closed down. The guy that owned the building turned it into a strip club. And he was so cheap that he named it Jiggles, because Giggles, the G was in cursive, and it looked like a J. And so instead of having to get a new sign, he just left the old sign up and just named it Jiggles instead of Giggles. And the most messed up part is, when it was Giggles, it really messed me up, because when it was a comedy club, I was there probably 3 nights a week doing comedy. It was a big part of my life. And then it turned into a strip club, and I was there every night. It became an even bigger part of my life. But so then there was another comedy club called Laughs in Kirkland, and
it's so funny you're saying these names, because in Boston we have a Laughs
everywhere.
We have a Laugh Boston, and we have a Giggles. They're both the big heritage clubs.
Yeah, it's just what it is. There's the Funny Bone, the Chuckle Hut.
You can only have so many names. Yeah.
So Laughs, the guy who turned it into a strip club, the city shut it down because it was too close to a school, and so then he rented it.
Well, the reason why it was so close to the school is so when they're done with stripping, they can go pick up their kid easily.
I thought you were going to say so they could get back to algebra class. But they ended up renting that space, and they turned it into Laughs again. And I had worked for them for a long time, too. I just, you have such a
circle of life.
The relationship with comedy club owners is so fickle.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the place that you came up.
Yeah.
Because they don't ever want to look at you as anything other than the guy that they gave stage time to.
Yeah.
So, when you start headlining clubs, they'll be like, we'd love to have you come back. We'll give you $800 with no hotel. And it's like, nah, man. Places that have never seen me are giving me $2,000 at least, and a hotel.
Yeah.
Why are you treating me so poorly? And then they're like, well, you owe us. We were the reason.
Oh.
It's there are other clubs that I performed at. You weren't the only place.
Yeah.
Just so happens that those other clubs are offering me the same deal. So I will never come back to that city and perform, which sucks. But, I just... They never look at you as being anything bigger than what you were.
When was the moment that you realized comedy could be a job that you can make a living from?
I'm still waiting.
A friend of mine always has this question on his podcast when he because his whole podcast is about TV, and he always would ask people, "When did you realize that television was made? That it was people making it? That people writing these words and acting these out and stuff." And to me, I never ever can remember when I didn't realize TV was made. When I was a small kid and I thought Captain Kangaroo was real, but there was a point in my cognitive life where I always knew that TV was made by people, movies were made by people, there was people who wrote this stuff, they were paid to do it, and I knew the same thing about comedy for the longest time, and that's what held me back from doing comedy, is because I knew before it was going to take 10 years of hard work before I could even make it a living, and there's no guarantee there will be a living made. Coming from the guy who's currently just celebrated his 13th year in doing comedy regularly, as opposed to the 10 years beforehand where I was doing comedy off and on. And it was like, I always knew that there was a living that could be made doing this stuff.
I never thought it was something I could do, because when I would watch the comedians on like late night shows, I thought that like they were geniuses.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, "There's no way that you can do that." And then I, start listening to it, and like I said earlier, like you just figure out the structure, and so it was still such a long time before. Honestly, like when I started it, I was like, "Oh, I can do this as my career." Then after a few years, I was like, "Man, I don't like you got. It's like winning the lottery to be able to do this as your career." But what was there ever a single moment? I think when it's like with that question about like when do you realize TV is made, I think it's when you're a child and you go to Disney World and the characters don't talk to you. And then you're like, oh, they're not real. This is all like made up. So I think at a young age is when you realize what acting is. But as far as like comedy and when you get never. You can never you can do this forever and you'll never be able to make a career out of it. There's things have changed now, which like when I moved to LA, I was born in 1980. So I grew up with real sitcoms on the 4 big networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. That was it.
And when we were kids, Fox was new. Fox was, Fox had premiered in 84?
Yeah.
Like it was nothing before that.
But that's what success was. Going to Montreal, doing Just for Laughs, and then getting a sitcom. So when I moved to LA, that was my focus. Where really, for the last 15 years, I should have just been doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Because that's what fame is now. Like, as a comedian, you're better off doing your own thing, cultivating your own audience, and then being able to tour, and those people that are truly fans come and see you, as opposed to being on a show that's on one of the 20 streaming networks now, and maybe 1,000 people know who you are, as opposed to back when we were young, you were on a sitcom, 7 million people watched you or whatever
every week.
Yeah,
they knew who you were, your name, household names. I mean, look at it, not even there's the bigs like Roseanne and Seinfeld and all that, but then there's the smaller ones like Brett Butler. She had her own sitcom, and she was a household name at the time, and then her star burned very bright, very quick, and it went away. But but also for every one of those that had a sitcom, there's 100 other comedians that never got even in the pitch meeting.
But in that time, you could just make a career, like a good career, being a road comic. So, but all that's gone now.
And then, of course, the same kind of conversation we're having now, someone's going to be having the opposite of is like, what I should be doing is put all my effort into TikTok, because that's all people want. They want those 10-second videos or whatever.
I just did a show with someone who has over 500,000 TikTok followers. And he wasn't able to do 12 minutes on the show. And was mediocre at best because, he's trying to get into stand-up. I think that's going to change very soon. I think people are going to go to enough shows and realize that these people aren't good live performers. And it's going to change to where I think it's going to cycle back to where people go to see real comedians.
See, that I would love to agree with you, but what I've seen through it is we have that cycle of different platforms that make it big. YouTubers, Vine stars. Now it just happens to be TikTok. And there's going to be another one that replaces that. And I think that there's always, even before all that, how many comedy clubs would have afternoons where they have soap opera stars come in and just do signings because they bring in more money and more people than we have. I think there's always going to be that cycle of a different thing that happens to be hot and popular now that they're going to use to supplement the income that they're not making from being a full-time comedy club, just to be able to support putting people like you, me, and other comedians on stage. They're going to have the clubs will have to sell their souls a little bit to bring in that whatever. They can give you a headlining weekend because they got Jimmy the Boney.
I just think the problem with that is that people come see those shows and then they're not as entertained as they thought they were going to be. Mm-hmm. So then they don't go see the people that they don't know. Whereas if just like they had just good comedians and people could rely on that, they would go, I don't know who that guy is, but I love stand-up comedy, so let's just go watch this person.
I
also sell my tickets for $15 instead of what you charge for the bigger people.
Make it more affordable, more people will go. Who knows? But,
yeah.
So why did you leave LA? Was it because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, my daughter was born, and I got scared. I didn't know if I was going to be able to support her. My wife tried to talk me out of it. My wife was very supportive, really believed in me, and
it's nice to have the support of somebody.
I mean,
with
still,
you.
Like I live 2 hours from Dallas, 5 hours from Austin, but whenever I get offered shows, she's like, "Yeah, you should go do it." We just, I just got called up this weekend to feature down in Austin at the Mothership, and my wife. Was like, "Yeah, well, I'll figure out what to do with Billy while I'm working. So you go do the shows." So she's super supportive in that, and I really should have listened to her. But when you're going crazy, there's no one can ever tell you anything that's going to fix it, and I was just like scared out of my mind and had lost hope, and I was like, I'm just going to go back to doing what I used to do, and I thought I was going to quit comedy.
The people who need to quit comedy, if you need to, do it.
But they never do.
Yeah, there's a lot of people we wish would quit comedy. But there's a couple of friends I've had that's like, I was not happy. And I was like, find your happiness.
Yeah.
If not doing comedy is going to make, like, I had a friend, finally got married, met the woman of his dreams, married her, and he's like, I don't want to do comedy anymore because the only person I want to make laugh is my wife. And she does that. But there's some people like out there that need this. You want to quit all the time, but
I mean, my buddy.
Like, the reason I do stand up, when I tell people, like, why do I do stand up, is because if I wasn't doing it on that stage, I'm doing it just like you, at a party. Yeah. I got everybody around me, I'm talking, I'm jiving, I'm telling stories, and I'm doing that. And if I wasn't doing it on the stage, I'd be doing it on the floor of somebody's house.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm on stage doing that.
Well, my friend Dave Waite told me, he was like, I never knew anybody who quit comedy that their life didn't get better. And when I quit and moved to Texas and everything kind of got worse, I was like, maybe I wasn't supposed to quit. And then I just had somebody who really believed in me, and he kept pushing me. And then he passed away last year before Christmas. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it really messed me up. But he like believed in me so much. He was opening up a club in Austin, and he wanted me to be down there, and then he passed away, and it just like lit something inside of me that had been gone for a while, and I just kind of was like, I'm gonna do what he knew I could, and so I started hitting up the Mothership, and I ended up getting past there, and I just started reaching out to all the clubs in Dallas, and was like, hey, I've done this and this, like. I can come perform whenever, and Plano here, Brittany, she picked me up and started putting me on shows. So, and then I started putting out more content. Like I like quit social media altogether, and I just started putting stuff out on social media again because I was like, this dude. I wish I would have done it while he was still here, but I know that that's something that he believed I could do, and. When he passed, I was like, fuck, it's not too late. So that's it. That's why I'm here doing this shit now.
So it's good that you had that support system. You had a friend that was pushing you. You have a wife that's being supportive. She's not nagging you. She's not saying your comedy's getting interfering with the family. She's like, we'll find a way to make it work.
Yeah,
and that's beautiful that you have that.
My wife being supportive and my friend dying were the two most important things for me continuing to do comedy.
She came into your life and he went out of your life.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, if people want to, Mitch, where can people find you now that you're putting clips out on social media, now that you're embracing that? Where can they find you?
So, TikTok, Instagram, it's all Mitch Burrow. Facebook, I'm sure if you're on Facebook, we're already friends. So. It's all Mitch Burrow. I put up stuff regularly, whether it's stand-up clips or I do redneck astrology and redneck tarot card readings. So it's like really fun, silly stuff. So follow me on social media, and then, clubs will start booking me because I'll have enough followers on social media. Because that's what it takes these days.
Well, look, I'm glad that you embrace the social media aspect because there's so many people that don't, and you're having fun with it. So at least that's bringing you the joy of that. So thanks for taking the time after the show, talking
thanks,
to me.
Man, I appreciate you inviting me on your podcast.
Absolutely, of course. And all right, go enjoy the hotel room before I drive
I'm
to
gonna
out
go
of
have
town.
one more shot before I leave.
Awesome.
They're not gonna let me do that.